so often I don't get to share in such detail of the richness of what's unfolding. And when we gather in this way, it gives me the opportunity to share. And it's a precious thing. And so I'm grateful for your being here, your interest, your willingness, and your commitment to your own awakening and your own path. So thank you. Thank you so much. What I'd like to do today is start with an overview, and some of you may have heard this before, but I want to start with an overview of the trajectory of my awakening experience, and then and that will continue to inform the ecstaticness that I want to speak to. So this is kind of like a map of my experience. And it doesn't mean that everyone awakens this way, or that it's the way to do it, or that if you open this way, you'll end up with the experiences that are happening here. Each person's unfolding is divinely chosen and divinely perfect for each individual. And the singular totality loves to do that in unique, infinite ways, which is why we all get to have our own unique experience. And the map can be looked at from different angles and described in different ways. But this is how the map has unfolded for me. My experience is that there is a individuated sense of self that's created as a lens. There's a structural component that creates an individuated experiential identity. So humanness looks like the human body, or the human mind, the human experience of a heart, the human psyche, and we have physical components that are reflections of that individuated experience. That individuated expression is also oneness with the whole plane that individuated experience happens within. And I often speak about this as a player piece in a game board, and that there are multiple game boards, which I can experience in a stacked sort of way, with multiple player pieces of an individuated trajectory through those player pieces. So if I come back to this individuated humanness, one human being feeling the experience of an individual self. It's one singular totality creating itself in that way to have that divine individuated experience. And in that oneness with the plane, we don't necessarily recognize we're one with this plane. But your vehicle of being here would not last very long without the air and the water and the food and the gravity and the ground. The electromagnetic frequencies of the planet. Right? There's all these components that we are actually one with, that we don't quite recognize. We're breathing all the time, drinking water, walking on the ground in the gravitational field. So we are literally one with the environment, with the individuated experience. So, and I experience this on multiple levels. So then the next level would be opening up as the soul. My experience of then feeling the soul body, which has the same gifted experience of an individual lens, of an individual experience. So when I look at my past lives, future lives, or I look at someone else's past lives, future lives, they're different. And there's a continuity, I often speak about it as a the divine organization. These individuated lenses both organize the experience in multiplicity that oneness is having. So oneness is having all of these experiences as these individuated expressions that arise out of itself as one consciousness. And so on the soul level, the same thing is true. The soul energetic body is made of the substance of that whole plane, an inseparable oneness. And yet there's an individuated lens that then has the sense of an I am, a sense of me, my soul, my lifetimes, the whole trajectory of all of that, and can then see other souls with their trajectory, their lifetimes experience. And so this so far is consistent for me, and that each dimension closer and closer to source is larger, more inclusive, includes the player pieces and the game boards that arise out of it, and that there's consistently an individuated lens. So far in my experience, there's an individuated aspect and a oneness aspect. So in this trajectory that's happened here, the sense of self, the individuated sense of self as Kristin, far before any awakening happened, would open to an experience of oneness. And there was a fully felt recognition, the sense of mind that used to just feel the mind of Kristin, opened up to the mind frequency, the mind of the whole plane, and experienced the mind of one totality. It wasn't until after my awakening, I'm not positive of this, that then that happened, that opening happened in through the heart and feeling the heart. So, and again, it happens differently for different people. So the initial movement was the individuated sense of self opening up as oneness. And at that time when that was happening, there was a psychic capacity of being able to communicate with animals and plants, and communicate with guides. But I experienced it at the time and still reference it that way now as a psychic, like a psychic capacity, which is very, very different than what is present now and how I would articulate what's happening now. When that sense of oneness, let me start again, when that sense of individuated expression opens up as oneness, there can be confusion for people. I've mentioned this before, that I would be driving in a car and have all this emotional range of experience, and it wasn't until years later I realized that I was experiencing everyone else's emotions in the cars that were driving by. And it's because there was an opening through oneness, but the maturity and the refinement hadn't occurred to be able to recognize the difference between the individuated lenses within this oneness. And this refinement and maturity, in my experience, is part of the process on every level. So every time there's an opening here to another sense of self and another game board and plane of oneness, there's a refinement and a discernment, a maturing that occurs to rest in the full integration of being that individuated expression and the oneness that lives cleanly that paradox of being the totality and being an individuated expression. And so if I continue on this trajectory, of the individuated sense of self opening up through the oneness of the plane. I also experienced an overarching masculine and feminine of that plane, and experienced them as two energies that were different and had different manifestations. And in the first union of that masculine and feminine, there was a recognition that it changed consciousness. So when I was resting in my office, my shiatsu massage practice at the time, sitting on my futon, resting in meditation, there was a curiosity of recognizing the mind as a mental, the masculine reflection, and the emotional body as the feminine reflection, and recognizing in myself there was a separation, and that there was a past and a future, and that the internal experience was of the masculine being more forward, the mind being more forward to protect the emotional body. And in an experiment of curiosity, wondering what would happen if the masculine and feminine came into union, I surrendered in meditation in this experiment, and the masculine and feminine dissolved into one. So there was then no distinction. There was the union, the mind and the heart came into oneness. Past and future dissolved. There's resting as presence. Present embodied moment of now. And in that experience and in that moment, there was a realization that the separation of the masculine and the feminine, or the mind and the body, the emotional reality, was intended to protect, but actually didn't. And actually perpetuated the previously experienced wounding, the previously identified wounding. It kept it separate. It kept it sequestered off from being in the alignment of the union of now, because that union is what is our innate truth, and that innately heals any identification. And so this masculine-feminine union, that was the first time that occurred for me. And the benefits were immediate, profound, and then became a practice for me.